So, thank you all for joining us, rather, if you're joining us now or in the future. My name is Natasha Soul. Welcome to the channel. I'm an energy alchemist and among other things. But I'm so happy you're here. And with me today, I have Dr. Chris Chlebowski of um, Ashland Natural Medicine and author of The Virus and the Host. Got his book right here. I've been rereading it. It stays close by for reference. And today we're talking about the healing frequencies of plant medicines. We're going to focus specifically on flower essences today, but I have a feeling that given this is a hot topic, it's a trending topic, especially concerning psilocybin, is a hot topic in the Pacific Northwest, at least that I'm aware of. But we're gonna focus in on flower essences today. So, Dr. Chris, thank you so much for being with me. Tell us a little bit about your book, and I'd like to start with, you mentioned in your book frequency medicine. If you can define that for us and tell us a little more about that.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here today. Frequency medicine is a big term, and in my mind, it can encompass a lot of things, ranging from dilutions of plants and homeopathic remedies to the use of technologies that send out frequencies to clients, machines and things like that can resonate at very particular frequencies. People might most be familiar with things like a Rife machine. Like a Rife machine is a frequency generator. And so frequency medicine really can encompass all of those things. I think you and I today are going to focus more on perhaps homeopathics and flower medicines and plant medicines, but it's a big topic, and I believe it's where the future of medicine lies.
That's awesome that you said that, because that was my question. One of my questions was, do you see this trending in the future? I mean, we're already seeing sort of this building of this trend in terms of frequency medicine, not so much the focus being on frequency, but plant medicines in general. And so in your book, you mention one of your chapters is how to harness but the power of botanical medicines. So if you can, just so that we can kind of refine our focus today, what's the difference between, like a tincture, a botanical root or herb in tincture form, as opposed in versus flower medicines?
Sure. So plants have a lot of different attributes, right? And they can be used in a lot of different ways. We can imbibe plants, we can eat them and gain some of their energetics and healing powers. We can take the gross herb and put it on our skin as a poultice. There's a lot of ways we can use sort of the materials of a plant to gain access to it. One of those ways is to tincturate it. It's to grind it up or macerate it and then sit it in alcohol and extract out the compounds. And many plants extract really well in alcohol. Alcohol is a really great solvent. And so tinctures, like you might go into the health food store and find, that's essentially what they are. Someone took the plant, ground it up, and soaked it in alcohol. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We get a very strong medicine from that, of the different components, the chemical components. But that might not completely transfer the energetics of that plant. The higher spiritual, etheric, mental vibrations that plants can help us heal. Something that accomplishes that on a different level is the use of flower essences. And so flower essences are a completely different sect of botanical medicine, where a practitioner takes a plant that has a flower and picks it at the exact right time when it has the most of its essence, often in the spring when it's first starting to bloom on a sunny day. And they take that flower and they sit it in a bowl of water distilled water or purified water, some kind of clean water, and they let that sit in the sun for 24 hours. That water becomes the medicine. That takes a very pure essence of the very high vibration of that plant. And that sort of medicine can heal deep, deep spiritual wounds in a person.
Mm.
That's not to say that a tincture can't do that also. But if you think about the very mechanistic 3D way we're talking about making a tincture versus this very high vibration way of making a flower essence, that might help one come to an understanding of why they could work so differently and on different levels of the human form.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I find it very interesting that you said that, what would you call these people who gather the flowers and create this? Are they called herbalists? What is their official title?
For someone that makes flower essences,
Yeah.
for someone that, well, first off, there aren't that many people that do it.
Uh-huh.
Just to speak to that, right? The herbal tradition, let's do a little history thing here, right? Like humans have evolved on the planet using herbs as their medicine.
Yeah.
Time immemorial. From the time that we're first humans here, that's what we used for medicine as plants.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we're moving through this cycle where for most of humankind, we did that. And then starting around the 1940s, the Rockefellers and some of the other big families, they started to change the way medicine was being used, and they started to go to petrochemical derivative drugs. And we've been sort of stuck in this model for the last 80 years. And I think we can all see that model is cracking and breaking and dying before our very eyes. That Rockefellian model is going by the wayside and people are fed up with it. And so really, we're just coming back to what we've always done, the use of plant medicines. So there are lots and lots of people that act as herbalists or have practiced herbalism over time. The use of flower essence therapy is a relatively new thing. Edward Bach, who was a medical doctor and a homeopath, he only started using flower essences and coming into this type of medicine less than 100 years ago. So the number of people on the planet that make medicines in that tradition out of flowers is actually quite small compared to herbalists. So honestly, I don't know that there's a codified name for people that do the creation of flower essences besides flower essence therapists.
Okay, awesome. Well, there are a couple of things I wanted to address. We're going to kind of go off onto some tangents, but bring it full circle. So these flower essence therapists, do they always put the flowers out in the sun? Is that part of the process pretty much?
Yes.
I find this interesting because of, and I'll tell you why, because of my last live with Alan Mitchell, we were discussing the Great Awakening map. And frequency medicine is a very important part in a subcategory in that map. And I find it very interesting that these therapists would use that, placing the flower essences out in the sun, because what we're talking about is light codes and energy. I mean, we all know that energy comes from the sun. It's what keeps our planet thriving, right? But there are specific light codes, and this Great Awakening map talks about that, light codes coming from our sun. So I find it very interesting that here is medicine that we're rediscovering over the last 100 years, that the application goes specifically to the spiritual aspect, as you've said, whereas the petro medicines, where Western medicine has based their methods on, is more about the physical. But here we have this medicine and this revitalization, if you will, and in interest into these medicines that they are processed by absorbing the energy and the light codes, the frequencies from the sun, and how it's all kind of tied into this map that we've been discussing and talking about. Um, Furthermore, I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Is that what I'm seeing, as an energy therapist, and I'd like for you to talk about this too, as a naturopathic homeopathic physician, um, that we are seeing this return to these frequency medicines, whether it's flower tincture, flower essences, or homeopathics, as you mentioned before. Tell us a little bit more about that and how you see that application of these sorts of medicines, um, assisting others in their path to well-being.
One of the ways I think about it is sort of pyramidal in nature. And it's a way I've always kind of thought about these medicines and how they fit. Because, right, we all know that at different times, different medicines and different therapies are what a person needs to heal. There is a time for surgery.
Mm-hmm.
We can't deny that. There's a time where, you fall out of a second story window and hit the pavement, that certain interventions need to be done and other ones wouldn't apply in that moment, right?
Yeah.
We can think in the same way of terms of like a tumor sometimes, where someone develops cancer and the tumor is so big and it's so great and it's pressing on organs that we literally have no time left, if we want to stay in this particular incarnation, to wait for other therapeutics to shrink that thing. And at some point it's too late. Sometimes we have to debulk the tumor, cut it out, and then work with other therapies. So one of the ways I think about therapeutics is this sort of pyramidal nature where, at the bottom, we think of the most 3D, the most reductionistic, in one way, the most superficial therapies,
Mm-hmm.
versus the things at the apex of the triangle that are truly the most deepest acting. They hit at the most core level of who we are as a soul being, and they really resonate on a much higher frequency, fifth dimension, eighth dimension, ninth dimension.
Mm-hmm.
Down at the bottom of that pyramid, like we were saying, are some of the reductionistic things like surgery. Maybe right above that are things like radiation therapy and chemotherapy. Then we go up to things like drugs, like the petrochemical drugs we were just talking about. Interestingly, above that are herbs in crude form. Now, they're a higher vibration than those things, but they're still in crude form. We could put food in there also.
Mm-hmm.
We start to get higher and higher, and we start to get to things like acupuncture and maybe energetic forms of chiropractic and craniosacral. Above that, we get to homeopathic remedies, dilutions of plants and minerals and animals that are succussed and diluted. Then we get up here, very interesting place in the work, the things that you do, things that energy therapists like you do, Natasha. That's where I put that sort of work. It's very, very high vibration. And maybe even slightly above that are flower essences. They're at the very apex of that, but they're like right up there with the stuff that you do. And so I think what's important to note is we need all of these things, at least now. At least now, while we're still primarily operating in the third dimension, the human form needs all of these things. I think, interestingly, as we as a species are evolving and rising up that pyramid, it's much more likely we'll need less of these things down at the bottom of the pyramid. But it's going to be a succession, right? It's going to be a rolling down of the road. It's going to be a change until we only vibrate at this place where we need these things. I should put frequency medicines up in here too, things like Rife frequencies and Skio, and bioscans and Healy's and all the other technologies that people use. They're up here somewhere too. So I think part of our evolution as a species, as we move into the next phase of, the golden age of humankind and the end of the Kali Yuga, it's likely we'll need more stuff at the top of the pyramid. I think inherently people are more interested in things up here now too, as we are starting to move into a less dense part of the universe, right? We're just naturally
Right.
attracted to these things,
Mhm.
and our
Mhm.
frequencies will require them more.
Mhm.
And I also think, in the big sense, what happened in the last 3 years and what's going to happen over the next 2 years, as we watched what happened with COVID, we watched what happened with all of this, our disillusionment with this system of medicine that is so fundamentally broken will
Mhm.
take us away from wanting anything from the lower tier, aside from the most basic life-giving procedures that we may require if we break a leg or
Right.
something like that.
Right, right. Yeah, I'm actually seeing that in the collective field, where people are seeking alternatives to surgery. And I think that innately people instinctively are tuning into this awareness that in the past, you went and had surgery and that was it was like done. You were done with whatever it was that was going on for you. That was like the go-to method, right? For a very long time. But I think that as we collectively rise in consciousness, that people are becoming more aware, more attuned to these alternative methods to well-being and healthcare. And even if they're not consciously doing it, I am seeing in the collective field this movement away from surgery. I mean, you yourself, and you can speak on this, most of the patients you probably see come to you looking for alternatives
Mhm.
because they're facing surgery, or maybe they already had surgery, or they're looking for an alternative to a different approach to their well-being and their journey of recovery. Would you say that there is a trend in that, or
Yeah, I think because really, as we stated earlier, that this new model of medicine, it is really new. In the human experience, I mean, people have the impression that like Western medicine or modern medicine, as they use these terms, which are really kind of silly terms, they have the sense that this is like the apex of medicine. This is the best it's ever been. It's never been greater. And we're making all these strides with genetics and molecules. And those are really just, they're mental constructs, and they're like a whitewashing of the facts. And it only takes so much time before you see the wizard behind the curtain and realize that most of that stuff is just, it's really, a lot of it's delusion, and a lot of it is false hope,
mm,
and that it's not really in the long term going to serve people. So of course people are trending in that way. I mean, I say it often to patients. I go, like, in your heart of hearts, do you think 200 years from now we're going to be taking ground up deceased pieces of virus and bacteria and mixing them with toxic chemicals and injecting them into people to stimulate their immunity? You really think 200 years from now we're going to be doing that? I don't think so. It's not the trajectory that the human race is on.
no,
Yeah.
no,
So I think it's just sort of like a little side blip that when we're going to look back with lots of perspective after many thousands of years, we'll go, oh, well, that was pretty funny that we did that for a little while. Not unlike the way we now look back and go, man, wasn't it silly that we used to put leeches on people, or that we
right,
people, or that, I don't know if you've ever heard of this one. There was a time where people used to cut holes in people and take pieces of horsehair and thread the horsehair through there and let the pus run out on the horsehair. It's not that different from those sorts of things. So
yeah, yes,
yeah, it makes perfect sense to me that we, of course, will be trending more towards these other
yeah,
types of
yeah.
healing.
Awesome. Well, kind of staying with that thread in terms of we talked a little bit about the future of medicine and this trend that we're presently seeing that we've are starting on. And I'm aware that you recently attended a flower essence workshop. And I'd like to give you an opportunity to speak more about that, and a couple of things, like what inspired you in terms of like what came to your awareness that you weren't aware of regarding flower essences, and what is the sort of trend that you see specific to that in your experience there at the workshop?
Yeah. So flower essences are something that I've used my entire career in medicine. In fact, it was the very first frequency or energy medicine that I had any experience with. So it's been a thread through the whole time I've practiced medicine.
Can I interject for just a moment? Can you tell your story? Just interject your story of the first time you came across flower essences.
Sure. Yeah, so I started my career as a chiropractor, and I went to chiropractic school, and I went to like the most Western medicine chiropractic school you could go to, because at that point in my paradigm, I thought that was important. I was still I had a foot in Western medicine, and I thought about becoming a medical doctor. And so I felt it was really important to be grounded in very strong science around that. But interestingly, my girlfriend at the time, she was a naturopath. She was in naturopathic school. So we had this wonderful, loving relationship, but we had this sort of like weaving in and out of philosophy where we bumped up against things and we were challenged by each other's paradigm. And she and I went up to Leavenworth, Washington to go rock climbing for a weekend on a spring break or something. And it was me and Carrie and my dog, Lucky. And we got to the campground after the first day of climbing, and there was these tree squirrels, and they were aggressive, and they were driving Lucky crazy. I mean, Lucky, who was normally a very calm dog, was out of his mind chasing these tree squirrels around and barking up the tree, and he could not rest for days. And so consequently, Carrie and I didn't get much rest. And I remember on the third day, we were back from climbing, and we were sitting there in our camp chairs having a beer, and Lucky was going nuts. And Carrie said, "Hey, I've got this thing in the truck. Can I try it?" And I was like, "Go ahead, try anything." So Carrie went to the truck, and she grabbed a little bottle like this, and she went over to Lucky's water bowl, and she put 3 drops of this thing in the water bowl, and she took Lucky by the collar and led him over to the water bowl. And Lucky took a few sips of the water bowl, and then he circled the tent 3 times, and he went and laid down in the tent. For the first time on our trip, he was calm. At that moment, it was like, I remember the feeling. I went, "Oh, shit."
There's something to this.
I'm responsible to pay attention to it. I can no longer say homeopathy is poo-poo, energy medicine is poo-poo. It's in my face. I'm faced with it. I have to look at it now. And so that began my journey ultimately into homeopathy and energy medicine and flower essences, because right, once we have an experience with something,
Right,
we're open-minded and conscious, we can no longer deny that.
right, right. Do you know what she gave him?
She gave him rescue remedy.
Stuff works, man.
Yeah. Rescue
It
remedy
works.
is 5 flowers that Edward Bach put together in an instant, because a sailor was drowning, and the sailor was brought to shore, and he was in shock. And Edward Bach, who was an intuitive, intuitively figured out he needed these 5 flowers. In that moment, he gave it to him, and the man came out of his shock, and that became rescue remedy, or the 5 flower formula. So I just learned that story at the flower essence seminar that I went to. And so that historical piece from my story is all to say that I've been interested in using flower essences my whole career, in addition to the other things I use. The primary teachers of flower essence therapy, the primary producers of it in the United States, are a couple named Patricia Kaminsky and Richard Katz. And they own and operate the Flower Essence Society out of Grass Valley, California, Nevada City. And so they've had a practitioner seminar going for decades that I've been aware of and wanting to go to for the last 10 years. They hold it every summer. And for one reason or another, mostly because I had little kids or I was busy with work and the seminar was kind of long. It was like a week long for a long time. They've now shortened it to 5 days. It was impossible for me to go. And then I was going to go right when COVID hit and they canceled it. So when it came around this year, I said, it's time for me to go. And I went down there, and I just have to tell you, it was the most beautiful, amazing, heart-opening lesson in philosophy, alchemy, sacred sexuality, sacred geometry, hermetics. I've never, in a teaching setting, never learned such a broad scope of understanding of so many different types of applications and relations to medicine than I did in this recent training that I just did with them for the flower essences. Not to mention, we learned tons and tons of materia medica about different remedies and really their philosophy and how they look at the way flower essence therapy can help people heal extremely deep psychological and spiritual wounds.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was absolutely beautiful.
Absolutely. What was your grandest takeaway from that experience?
I get really busy, at work. I see a lot of people. I'm moving fast. People are sicker than ever. I think my biggest takeaway was to slow down, spend a minute, and as many times as you can, make sure you also fit the flowers into someone's treatment plan. Because that hierarchy that we talked about before, I also think about that in relation to each patient, that each patient might need something from down here. They might need me to give them a drug to overcome something. And they might need some dietary advice. They might need some herbs. They might need a remedy. They might need a referral to Natasha, but they also need this thing at the top. And so don't hand them the pyramid missing the very top.
Right.
So, and everybody's going to need it at some point in their care, but many people might need it all along, because giving the top to the pyramid opens up everything else and allows all the other therapies to work.
Right. Well, that was one of my questions. You just answered. I was going to ask, what is the most beneficial? I mean, we've kind of talked a little bit about how they work, flower essences, that is, but it's like, what is the most beneficial application? You just answered it. Like, let it address the spiritual aspect of what is going on. Is there more you'd like to say to that in terms of application?
I mean, I think one of the other things that I took away from it, I'd never really thought about it before, is that I think about a lot of, like, let's talk about homeopathy for a minute. So homeopathy is it's my primary tool. It's the thing I've always loved the most. It's the thing I find to be the most effective. It's the tool I reach for most commonly. And homeopathy, for people that don't know, is a 200-plus-year-old school of medicine that a German medical doctor came up with, where he took dilutions of plants and minerals and animals, diluted them and succussed them to help bring out the energetic frequency of those substances, and then gave people those substances in dilution. And homeopathy is extremely powerful. It can treat, severe diseases to very psychospiritual things. In one way, when you're working at the very top of the pyramid, though, with homeopathy, sometimes the gestalt of the remedy, the true essence and spirituality of it, the picture that it paints emotionally, can some ways be limited. When people talk, they can tell you all sorts of things about their emotional experience. And if you're trying to match that up with a single remedy, that can be really hard, because everybody's so incredibly unique. The beautiful thing about flower essences is that people can say a bunch of different things about their emotional landscape, and you can kind of find one flower for one piece of it, and another flower for another piece of it, and another flower for another piece of it. And you can mix all those together and come up with a medicine that then, in a better way, I feel describes their emotional landscape. And the way I've been thinking about it since I was at that seminar last month is it's like the flower essences are like individual colors in a paint box.
I love that analogy.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
the
totally.
homeopathy is like the big broad pen that draws the tree. I'm an incredible artist, as you can tell. But then the flower essences are like each individual color that you want to put in there.
Nice.
So beautiful
Yeah,
the way you can match someone's emotional territory.
totally, totally. In the times that I've been guided during a session for a client to give a flower essence, oftentimes it comes in as a bouquet, if you will, a bouquet of different essences. And yeah, I love that analogy because it's so true. And again, working with energy, a lot of the times I see colors.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the analogy just fits perfectly with
Well, and
that.
what are flowers? They're these beautiful little expressions of light that show up as color. Like
Right,
that's the other thing. Yeah, they are the paint box. You know,
right.
yeah, they're the distillation of that plant's signature in this beautiful expression for us to appreciate, like
Mhm, mhm.
flowers are there to be viewed and loved and smelled and related to. Why else would they be there but for us to
Right.
gaze upon them and see beauty in them?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like we're doing frequency medicine just by being with the plant, with in this case, flowers. And so if you can speak a little bit more on that, because you talk about that in your book as well, that plants are our friends.
Yeah,
So let's just talk about being in the vicinity. Like how does that apply to well-being?
sure. Well, as a species, we evolved next to these things. We literally have always evolved next to plants. They grow around us, they're our food. It's impossible to extricate the human experience from the botanical experience. We literally, well, think about, you brought up psilocybin. Think about psilocybin for a second. Like, we have receptors in our brain where the psilocybin molecule fits like a lock and key and therefore turns on all of this psychedelic experience.
Mhm.
We don't have that by accident. You wouldn't have that receptor if humans hadn't been imbibing that substance all along. So I think that to recognize that it's not just about ingesting these things, but literally we are woven together with them. And so therefore they grow around us. Now, maybe we've crowded them out with our cityscapes by putting asphalt down and buildings. But when we're in the habitat we're supposed to be living in, which I believe is close to nature, interacting with nature every day, that you should be around these plants. And that I believe that our plants that are our greatest botanical allies should grow around us too, because we do gain healings, not only from taking them in, but from literally seeing them or being in their field, meditating with them, being near them, and watching their experience as they go throughout the year and how they change. That is deeply healing for us.
Oh,
And
totally.
part of our wound is that we are removed from that now.
Mhm,
That if you
mhm.
live on the 37th story of a building in New York City and your only experience with plants is your little house plant that you might have or the bag of carrots you buy at the grocery store, that's very different than living in an environment where you're walking barefoot outside and having an experience with many plants every single day.
Right.
So I believe as a species, we are going to move back to that too. That
Mhm.
as much as the World Economic Forum and these greater, structures are trying to put us into these 15-minute cities and keep us distracted from nature. That's not going to happen. What's going to happen with the human race is we're going to become more intertwined with nature again. We're going to start taking care of our planet again in the way that we're supposed to. And more and more people are going to have an intimate relationship with plants.
Totally, totally. I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about the other day with the Great Awakening map is we're watching that, what the World Economic Forum is, that trajectory that they're trying to enforce is totally crumbling. And what the things that we're talking about today regarding plant medicine and frequencies, and that's the direction that we're moving in. It's so very clear. It's just like, look at the map and then look at the media. The media is showing you exactly what's happening. Yeah, so I would say in an end statement, I would be bold to say that frequency medicine is the medicine of the future, and it's part of us moving collectively into this new earth, not not new world order, but new earth paradigm,
Yes.
and this higher dimension, a fourth density, fifth dimension way of being, and knowing ourselves as energy being and energy beings, and interacting with different energies for well-being. Would you agree with that statement?
Absolutely. And what comes to mind too is I think, people might think about homeopathy and the little blue tubes that you see at the health food store and like, oh, that would be nice if I had a sniffle or a cold or a sore throat or something simplistic. Or they might think, yeah, if I feel some anxiety, I could take a little bit of the mimulus flower and it would deal with that. But what I want to remind people that they may not have a direct experience with is that you can treat extremely deep pathologies and extremely severe pathologies with these medicines too. So, I'm sure there's lots of people who are still stuck in that paradigm that I used to be stuck in, that mechanistic, reductionistic. Yeah, these are okay. I'll think about these things for this sort of stuff, but I won't think about them when I have the cancer or the
Right.
cardiovascular disease. And what I would say, you can't truly heal these things without using these frequency medicines. So I'm seeing that every day in practice, that we're getting deeper and deeper and quicker resolution to very severe pathologies if we use these medicines in addition to everything else. We're able to get people off the drugs way faster. We're able to get the cancers to resolve. We're able to get all these things to happen if we're making sure we're using all of those. So
Absolutely.
I think they're fundamental to our development and fundamental to, the new healthcare crisis that's been brought on by this virus created in a lab, and then the subsequent experimental injections that are causing so much harm to people. We have to use these medicines to undo this layer of toxicity that's just been forced on the human race.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that it's part of clearing that default programming. We've been talking a lot about clearing default programming, these belief structures of, it's all in the physical to remedy a situation, an illness, a disease. It's all about the physical, taking the drug, having the surgery. But I think what you're saying is spot on in regards to what we're seeing in the evolution of consciousness for humanity, is that we're like stepping back and saying, wait a minute, there's something more to this that needs to occur. This isn't just about my physical body. This is about my mental, emotional, spiritual health as well. And I think that more and more people are opening up to that reality. It's
Yes.
a reality that, like you said, an illusion We've been under this illusion that it's not anything more than the physical being. But we're Lionsgate Energies were a lot about clearing those default programs regarding well-being.
And the other piece I think we should talk about as we're discussing there is the sustainability of all of it too, is that, right? If we
Yes, thank you.
recognize that we are doing unsustainable things on our planet, Mother Earth, though she will always heal, if we're doing things that are harming the earth, and I'm not talking about the climate change agenda, I'm talking about polluting the planet or cutting down rainforests, doing things that we just know in our heart of hearts aren't healthy for the planet.
Right.
If we look at the types of medicines that are being used currently in this current paradigm of medicine, they're hugely destructive to the planet.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at flower essence therapy or homeopathy, you need this much of one plant to make all the medicine you would ever need.
Right.
That in and of itself speaks to the paradigm blowing up of using these medicines moving forward. Frequency medicines that can be generated by a small machine that can heal someone that uses almost no electricity. These are absolutely the way we have to go too for the sustainability of these medicines. If we're going to continue to grow as a population, we're going to send people off to other planets. We're going to need things that are highly sustainable. And so these are the highly sustainable medicines.
Highly sustainable, and you just triggered a thought too. Highly integral as well. I mean, let's compare this this couple that has been creating these flower essences, and you can speak to this. Like, what sort of environment did you find yourself in when you went to the seminar versus what we know about the pharmaceutical companies?
Yeah, the place that they live and work and hold their classes and create these medicines is like the Garden of Eden.
Mm-hmm.
So incredibly beautiful, done with so much intention and so much love and so much grace for the good of the planet. It's mind-blowing, really. We could spend an hour just talking about what I witnessed there.
Yeah.
And then speaking about, the intention too, they told stories about hiking up into the high Sierra to find a flower that they can't grow down where they live, and getting there 3 days too early because it really wasn't at the peak of the experience of the flower. And so having to wait 3 days up in the mountains to pick a handful of flowers from one plant that then would make medicine for thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So right there, you have this incredibly intentional experience, a very altruistic experience, a highly spiritual experience, and an incredibly sustainable. That plant is none the worse the wear for having some blooms taken off at one time. And that medicine will last for years and years and years for thousands and thousands of people.
Wow.
You can't say that about making a chemotherapeutic drug or
No.
make any of the other pharmaceuticals that people take by the bucketful every day.
Right.
What intense spirituality goes into the processing of a torvastatin?
Oh gosh. And with that, I'm going to challenge our viewers. If you have a pharmaceutical drug nearby, put that in your hand, and then put the rescue remedy or any sort of other flower essence in your hand, and just close your eyes and be still for a moment and feel the frequencies, feel the vibration in those two medicines, and tell me which one resonates to you the most. Which one feels good in your body? And just give it a try. Experiment for yourself, and let me know. Let me know what you find out in the comments. Just give it a try.
miss the fact that sometimes people need things at the bottom of the pyramid, right? Like we both,
Totally.
sometimes people need an antibiotic.
Totally.
I prescribe antibiotics at times. Sometimes people need a heart medication, right?
Yeah,
It's just the truth. And so we can't dismiss the value in those things as we're
totally.
operating in 3D. But
Totally.
you're 100% right, Natasha. They have very, very different vibrations.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about, because we are nearing time, but in your book, you talk a lot about toxicity and how can we apply flower essences to mitigating toxicity?
What a great question. Wow. So it's one of my deep premises in medicine and my experience with treating people for the last 16 years that toxicity is at the root of a lot of illness. That we develop a lot of our health issues secondary to the fact that we're full of toxins. And every single person I check, whether they eat organic or not, whether they're conscious about their health or not, has toxicity in their body. From molds to plastics to metals, you name it. We're all full of it because the world is an extremely toxic place. So we need to do things on a daily basis to remove those toxins from our system. Things like saunaing,
Mm.
dry skin brushing, drinking lots of fresh, pure water, exercising. There's all sorts of basic tools we can use to help remove toxins. We can also use herbs that have an affinity for particular organs. We can use herbs that help our liver dump toxins. We can use homeopathics, dilutions of those things that would ask of our system to open our cells up and remove some of those toxicity. And we can use flower essences in the same way. There are flowers that have, at their specific frequency and their specific color, as we were talking about early, removing toxicity from psychic toxicity to physical toxicity. It makes me think of black-eyed Susan. People know black-eyed Susan. They see it growing around all over the place right now. Black-eyed Susan on the physical level can help clear up pus and boils and skin things where the body's trying to discharge toxin through the skin.
Mm-hmm.
So if people, we're struggling with things like that, you could take black-eyed Susan flower essence and it might help those things to express and move out of the body quicker.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you were having like a psychic toxicity, like you had encountered someone that you picked up some of their energy and it fell on you like a wet blanket, or you went into a space and you felt, perhaps the spirits of past incarnations there, and they sort of latched onto you and glommed onto you. You could take a flower essence like chaparral or something like that, where it's a psychic cleaner. It helps detoxify those things. So the flowers have this range of their ability to help us detoxify too. And there's a ton of information about that stuff. Yeah.
Very, very cool. Very cool. So in your professional opinion, what would be the top 5 flower essences for people? Like the book that that you and I were both reading a couple of months ago, which I can't remember the name, but it talked about the 5 top homeopathics.
Pink book?
Yeah, the pink book. But what, in your opinion, would be the top 5 flower essences to have in a person's medicine cabinet?
That's a great question. Well, first off, for people that don't know, most health food stores, good health food stores or good co-ops carry flower essences. And the most of them here in the United States carry the Flower Essence Society brand, which is this little purple one. And they typically have them on these little wooden shelves in a health food store. You'll see them in there. And they might even have a little book that has the indications that someone could go and sort of flip through and look: anxiety, depression, fear of public speaking, things like that, that would sort of clue you in. And you could just go into the health food store and flip through there and find one that resonates with you. So I would say, number one, that's the top one for you, is to go find the local place that has that and drop into your meditative space. Try and go as deep as you can into what your fundamental wounds are. Often people will think, oh, I have this anxiety or this concern, and it's really just a symptom of something deeper. So if you can kind of drop in as deep as you possibly can, it's more likely you'll find something that will help you versus dealing with a superficial complaint.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one place to start. I would say that's the number one flower essence, because it's the one that's more specific for you. Number two, as we talked about earlier, if people don't know Rescue Remedy or the 5-flower formula, that's a great place to start. Just was for my dog Lucky, because Dr. Bach was an intuitive and he had a lot of magic in relation to the flowers. That particular synergy of those 5 flowers is really useful for any sort of trauma or stress.
Totally. Oh my gosh, it's such an amazing flower essence formula. I used it a lot for my kids when they were growing up, and whenever they fell and hurt themselves or they were feeling anxious, like, it works wonders. Yeah. Totally agree.
Pets, adults, anytime there's a little trauma or something, and you don't have to worry about sort of overdosing it, because it's flowers in water. It's really gentle. But I mean, I'm sure you can speak to this time, Natasha, where there was a kid, one of your children, and something happened, and you gave 5-flower remedy, and the thing went away.
Oh, totally. Just like your dog. Where it just took a matter of seconds, and then there it was like, oh, okay, everything's better now.
I know dentists use it. People come in and they're very anxious about having a dental procedure. They put a couple drops of 5-flower in there and the patient just calms down. We use it in our IV suite. If people are nervous about getting an IV, just a few drops of that, it can just evaporate the problem. So that's number two. Buy a bottle or two and have it at home, have it in the car, have it in your purse, have it in your pocket. It's a really useful one. I'm a big fan of aspen. Aspen's a really common one. It's one of Bach's 38 flowers. And you think about the aspen and the way the aspen tree grows and what it does. It's this very fine, slender tree, and it trembles in the wind. When the wind blows through, it has this very distinct sort of trembling. And that's the signature, I think, of aspen. Is aspen sort of freaked out about this and freaked out about that, kind of scared of this thing. And it's sort of when we have these fears and, it's hard to stay grounded. We're sort of trembling in the wind like that. That can just be a beautiful one for people to take if they're nervous about different things.
Yeah, especially right now with all that we're seeing in the media, right?
Yeah, aspen can be a great one for that. For people that are sort of freaked out about a lot of different things.
Yeah.
If I was going to think of my other top two, one of the other ones that I think about a lot in that same range is Mimulus, is another one of Bach's ones, and that's another nervous anxiety remedy. And I think about Mimulus a lot for little kids and animals, where little kids they're worried about the dark, or they're worried about mommy or daddy leaving, or they're worried about school. Mimulus really just kind of takes that down. It's like it's a really nice one for little people and little beings when you want to kind of calm their concerns and fears.
Do you think it would be good for also pets who tend to be nervous in that way? Like a nervous dog who's not able to settle down?
Yeah, it's a great one for pets. Yeah.
Like a barky dog who just barks at every little thing.
Yeah, it can help that. I think back to that previous thing, if we sit and think about, why is the dog barking? Is the dog barking anxious? They're being overprotective, they're angry, and then you can find the remedy that fits perfectly. But yes, Mimulus could help if that dog was barking because they're really nervous and worried about something. Yeah.
Okay.
I think a remedy that would be really useful for your viewers is the yarrows. People know yarrow too. It's that beautiful plant that grows around in nature at this time in the Western United States. And we have white yarrow, we have yellow yarrow, we have pink yarrow. Pink yarrow will serve some of your listeners because
Pink yarrow.
Pink yarrow is about people that are very sensitive. It's
Mm,
the healers, it's the intuitives, it's the herbalists, it's the
mhm,
naturopaths, it's the people that open their hearts and their being to try and be empathetic so they can relate to the experience of people they're trying to help.
mhm,
But
mhm.
right, we all know this too. If we're too open, we can take on some of that stuff and we can feel bad.
Totally.
Yarrow helps build this shield against that thing. We
Mhm.
remain empathetic and open, and we can relate to the experience, but we don't have to take it on ourselves.
Excellent. Good information. Beautiful, beautiful. Well, let's throw in the bonus. Let's throw in a bonus one. Let's talk a little bit about the flower essence that you and I discovered that helps with dreams.
Yeah. You have it there?
I wish I did.
A bedside table. Is it the green spider orchid?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, orchids are interesting. There's a bunch of orchid flower essences, and orchids have this like deep sensitivity and this sensuality to them. You could just look at an orchid and feel that. And the orchids, they feel a lot, right? People that need orchid can feel sort of the weight of the world. They can carry the cross of the world on their backs, not unlike yarrow can in a way. There's subtle differences. But this orchid that we discovered helps without caring too much of it, but it helps you tap into the dream world and the world that is beyond the veil of 3D. It can help open insights into our dreams and what they mean for us and have a more vivid dream life. So that's a really powerful one, an interesting one for people that are maybe dipping their toe into extrasensory places in their being.
Totally, totally.
A lot of the
Very,
flowers can do that. A lot of the flowers can do it.
yeah, yeah. Very good at helping with lucid dreaming, as well as just tapping into the subconscious through the form of dreams. That was my experience with it. Would you say?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I still feel called to take it some nights. I'll take it before bed, and I tend to have a more rich, vivid dream life, and that, or
Mm.
I tend to get more messages through my dream that are important and resonant and palpable that next morning when I get up and I write them down.
Yeah, I do too. I like to take it when I'm dropping into the collective consciousness and asking for clarity around where we are moving collectively. That's when I'll take it to get more insight on that.
Yeah.
Very good. This has been so fun and it's just so chock full of information. We're at time, but I wanted to check in and give you an opportunity. What is the last key message you'd like to leave us with?
I think it would be interesting for people that are called to this and are interested in it. I think flower essence therapy is a really neat, easy way for someone to start to experiment with these types of frequency medicines because they're accessible, they're inexpensive. And I would recommend, as I described earlier, how to go find one. Take one and give yourself a couple of weeks with it because your first impression might be that nothing is happening, but there are subtle yet deep things happening, and give yourself a little time. I promise you, if you find a good one for you and you step back from a little bit of time, a few weeks, things will have changed and shifted. There will be subtle changes in your being that should be perceptible to you. And that will open up a whole world for you as it did for me.
Awesome. Brilliant. Well done. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Chris, for joining us. And again, you guys, this is an amazing book. Let's see if you can see it. The Virus and the Host. It has so much information and it reads like a story. It's not like a dry medical book. It reads like a story, but chock full of lots of information. Thank you so much, Dr. Chris. Really appreciate you having you on the channel.
Thank you so much. It was super fun. Great to
All
see you.
right. Good to see you. Take care.